Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to COASTER-net Updates. We've got some news out of Anaheim, California, where Disneyland has officially filed permits to start construction of their new Marvel Land. Now, Danny, this is no surprise to anyone here that we've kind of speculated for a very long time that the area formerly known as Bug's Life would be getting a Marvel overlay. The only new news is that we actually have permits being filed for nothing really exciting yet. So the permits that were filed were for character meet and greets, retail outlets, a microbrewery, that sort of thing. And the only other real news to talk about here is the fact that around this area, fences have gone up that sport the Stark Industries logo. That you know and love from all those great movies. So I guess it's official in the sense of, yes, we've known it's coming. Now we see the park actually moving forward, putting up fencing, putting up Stark Industries logos, actually filing permits for some construction happening in the Bugs Life area. Now, there's no talk of rides yet, though, Danny. There's no permits for rides, none of that. So what are some of your initial thoughts here, being the newly minted Marvel fan that you are?
Yeah, that's right. We haven't really talked Marvel much here on the show. So for those of you who maybe are or aren't, I had never seen any of the Marvel movies up until about a month ago. And over the course of the last, 4 weeks, I saw Endgame last week, and it's second to last day in theaters. And I watched all 22 movies in about a 4-week time span. I watched almost one a night, not always on the weekends, but I watched the entire series. So this is very fresh in my mind here. I've actually begun watching them through a second time here. You and I have talked ad nauseum about them. And I remember, if you're a fan of Coaster Radio, you'll remember in the very first season of their show, they did something called the Real Design Contest. And that was in 2005, and they had someone who did a motorbike coaster now this is before the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. They pitched an idea of a motorbike coaster for a Harry Potter world themed around Quidditch. Okay, and then, here we are 15 years later, and something very similar has come to pass here. They had some other ideas. I think the winning one was based on a movie called Mirror Mask, which is a very not well-known movie at all. They did it again several years later, maybe 6 or 7 years later, and one of the finalists in the second time around was a dark ride that someone had thought up, based around Stark Expo. The name was Stark Expo: The Iron Man Experience, and I think it came in second place. And they had industry judges. They had someone from Disney who actually judged. They had someone from Ace come in and judge. They had a guy from Gravity Group. They had Neil Patrick Harris come in and be a judge. I think a dark ride based on the movie Up was what ended up winning. But there was a very strong Iron Man themed dark ride experience that involved going through the pre-show and going through the Stark Expo. And to link it back to the movies, it very much seemed like an Iron Man 2 type story that would be played out through this dark ride here, where you would have War Machine and you would have all that going on. So that, to me, might be the most obvious one. I think Iron Man is maybe the character that most easily lends itself to some sort of dark ride where you could do a Spider-Man type ride.
Well, we've seen a few things. We've seen recently Disney file new patents for different ride systems. There was a Spider-Man-based ride system that they were trying to create where you would, actually go on a ride through a city and swing back and forth, almost like a roller coaster type thing, but with moving cars. We've seen a whole bunch of different patents. So, there's probably about a dozen or so recent patents out of Disney that could be tied to some of these rides. Over in Asia, we've actually seen Disney open up an Iron Man ride And that was basically just essentially another version of Star Tours, which is kind of interesting because there is talk of possibly pulling Star Tours out of Disneyland, and they could just move that whole ride system right over across to the other park and recreate what they have over in Asia, and recreate the Iron Man Star Tours. Now, that's not that exciting. Like that technology is kind of dated. That opened up in the early 90s, late 80s. So
Yeah.
to me, that's not super exciting at all.
No, I think there's a couple obvious ones, and if we're just going off of phases 1 through 3 here, and really the main characters, I think Iron Man is one of the easy ones or one of the obvious ones. I don't think you go Hulk. I think you could make something work with Captain America. Maybe if you work in the Winter Soldier somehow. Maybe you even do some sort of Civil War type attraction where you could have maybe different cars go battling with each other. I think that might be kind of interesting. Spider-Man, I think, is the other really well-known character that has mass appeal. In terms of the characters that have become more popular just based off of the MCU movies, like Black Panther, Doctor Strange, I don't think there's enough there yet.
I think you almost need a ride that is an Avengers. So you have your Iron Man ride.
Right.
You need something that encompasses all of them.
Yeah.
As much as I don't think it's a roller coaster, I do count as a coaster, but as much as I think that the whole ride system is kind of ridiculous, almost like a Gringotts style ride where you're introduced. I'm not saying I want more screen rides in my life, but the basic idea is you introduce a lot of different characters over that Gringotts ride. There's a whole lot of different people in there that you get to see. And I think maybe that's the road to go down, an Avengers-based ride, because this is kind of like your one big shot that you're not going to be able to do anything down in Orlando because of the Universal deal, with all the main characters at the very least. So this is like your one shot. And the Bugs Life area is not that big. So it's not like you're going to have a whole lot of space to do something. I don't know if they're going to go into more backstage areas or if they're just going to exclusively use the Bugs Life area. But there's not a whole lot of opportunity to do something, multiple things that are super big. So maybe it is the Iron Man screen ride, motion simulator, plus a bigger Avengers type ride, which I think would have to encompass everything to get everyone involved.
And I think there's 2 ways you can do that as we know things right now. And if you, for whatever reason, are a Marvel fan and have not seen Endgame yet, skip ahead maybe 2 minutes here. But I have 2 ideas based on having just seen Endgame less than a week ago. And I don't know if these things are going to be tied up somewhere in the later phases because we've got the Phase 4 movies coming out. There's 2 things from Endgame specifically that I think you might be able to make something work. One, could you do an Avengers theme ride where you're following Captain America as he's returning the stones to their respective timelines? I think that's an idea because that's something we probably won't see hashed out moving forward. That's just something that I think we have to suspend disbelief. We have to assume that happens. We assume that happens in that 8-second time span and things are just the way they are and it ends how it is. Maybe that's an area that they could explore so that it's something they could do a ride themed after. You could have different conflicts here and there. You could stretch that out into like an 8 to 10 minute dark ride. You could see all the different characters potentially as they go through their different timelines. You could make that work somehow. And if you don't want it to be canonic, it doesn't necessarily have to be.
But it would make people want to go there and have to experience that.
Yes.
That if you're going to make it, I think that's a brilliant idea, because if you make it a part of that story that we haven't actually seen, and we're probably, like you said, we're probably never going to see it, then that's going to have a lot more interest. Whereas, okay, if you're just doing a Tony Stark, flyover California type deal,
or just reenacting the Battle of New York,
like that's not gonna really make me feel like, oh, I have to go ride that. But if you're going to make it, and reveal parts of the story, all these hardcore Avengers people are going to be like, oh, well, now I have to go see that. Now I have to go ride that.
And I have one other idea, and I don't like this idea as much because I think we're going to see this one. I think we're going to see this one hashed out in later movies as we get into the next phases here. And again, haven't seen Endgame yet. Skip ahead maybe again. They leave it hanging during Endgame where Loki actually makes away with the Tesseract at one point, which we don't know happens at any point. That's something we find out in Endgame, that when they tack on to the end of Avengers 1, or Avengers Assemble, as it's called in the UK and what my box set says, we find out that Loki makes away with the Tesseract. And who knows where that ends up coming into play, what happens in between there. They could maybe do something with that, although I feel like we might see that hashed out in more detail later. Well, I think the way to...
The rumor with that is that might be what the storyline of the Disney Plus series is going to be, because Loki's getting his own Disney Plus series, and some people have speculated that it's going to follow that. We don't know for sure, obviously. There's been no real confirmation either here nor, whatever. But some people have speculated that that's what that series is going to be about. So I still like the first idea way better.
Yeah, and I think you could do something really cool with the name. Like it doesn't even have to be specifically Captain America branded. I mean, you could you could do something Avengers Journey to Infinity or something like that, and that's returning the Infinity Stones back to their respective timelines. I think that's something that would be a really intriguing storyline for Marvel fans, and you can still do something interesting for the non-Marvel fans. 2, it's something that we're probably not going to see hashed out in future movies. That's something we're just supposed to believe.
Yeah.
And 3, I think there's enough opportunity that you can see the different characters and some of the different villains, and you can have them all involved with the story and have it fit in and have it be canonic if you want it to be. I think you could structure it that way, that something like that would work and have that be the centerpiece attraction.
And if you look at what they did with Guardians of the Galaxy already at California's Adventure, that they created a unique story that fits into a certain time period. What they're doing with Galaxy's Edge, they're creating a unique story that fits into the larger story. So I would assume that's exactly what we're going to see here. Not so much.
Rise of the Resistance is going to be its own story within the other stories that are part of the films.
And that's different than kind of what, Universal kind of does that too with Transformers. You think of Transformers, like they created the unique story, but it doesn't really fit into, it's hard to fit that in anywhere else. It's just another robot battle. Spider-Man is kind of just like another adventure. And that works for those rides. But I think this ties more directly because you have these specific movies that they're going to be based on. So, and they're not just retelling the movie, basically, which is, I hate rides like that. I don't want to be retold the same movie I've already seen. I want something new and unique, something that adds to the stuff I've already seen, makes me want to ride it, right?
Well, yeah, and the big problem when you try and retell a story from a movie within a ride is it always feels rushed, right?
Yeah. Horror nights every time.
Well, people, the big ride that I remember people complaining about was when Disney opened the new Little Mermaid ride about 6 or 7 years ago. People said it feels really rushed because you have all the major scenes in the movie for the most part, but then you just jump to the end, and it's like, wait a minute, we have this hour and 30-minute movie, and we just watched basically the whole thing in 6 minutes, and it always feels rushed. I mean, the Battle of New York in Avengers Assemble that's a 2 hour and 20-minute movie. The Battle of New York is 45 minutes by itself. So to try and stick that part into a 10-minute dark ride, which is pretty long for a ride, is going to feel rushed as it is. And to see all the characters and get all these different special effects, it's going to feel real rushed. If you have something that we don't know what the story is, then I think you have a better chance of molding it into a believable experience, because in reality, we're supposed to believe that it takes place over the course of 8 seconds.
So one last announcement before we go here. But we are actually going to talk a little more Marvel. I know all of you guys are like, yeah, we want to talk Marvel here. I've been a Marvel fan since the early 90s. You are just a Marvel fan in the last 3 weeks. So we're going to talk a little Marvel.
Basically, since the middle of May.
And we're going to resurrect that old show called Ride Warriors Assemble. Yeah, that one show that we did way back when. Nobody watched it. So we're going to re-theme that. Just like they did to Tower of Terror. We're going to retheme that show and keep the name and just talk about something completely different. But this is going to be a Patreon-only show where we talk a little Marvel movies.
And there might be multiple of these.
Yeah, this is going to be more than one. You are not going to be able to talk about 22 movies in less than 30 minutes, so let's be honest here.
No, I mean
you talked about Centralia for 45.
Well, yeah, seriously. that was a day. But no, because as I was watching them, I mean, essentially I didn't always watch them on the weekends because we were at a few parks here and there. We had Hollywood Nights mixed in there. Memorial Day weekend was mixed in there. But essentially during the weeks I was watching one movie a night. And basically, whenever I got done with a movie, most of the times you and I would talk about each one for, 30, 40 minutes afterwards.
I may actually have to rewatch some of these because it's been so long since I watched them when they first came out. So it's been 10 years already since I've seen some of these films, especially like things like Hulk and Thor: Dark World. So I might have to rewatch them too, just to be able to speak intelligently on this. So
well, maybe that should be the way that we break them up, because I went, I have been told by a couple people that I should watch them, especially with Endgame coming out. And I was intimidated by the fact that there was 21 movies that I had to go watch before Endgame, because I've never been a movie guy. I don't really go out to the movie theater just to see movies. I go out to see Star Wars, and I went out to see Jurassic World. Didn't see the new Jurassic World, but I maybe go to the movies once a year, and it's usually for the Star Wars movies. And I rented Captain America: The First Avenger on Amazon on a Saturday night. And by Sunday morning, had ordered the Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 Part 1 box sets on Amazon. And they're sitting over here, and I watched them through. And as soon as Phase 3 box Part 2 with the last 5 movies comes out and is available on Amazon, probably towards the end of the summer, I'll be getting that one too. So I've turned into a huge Marvel fan. I enjoyed every single one of the movies, some more than others. Really, only a couple that I came away even slightly disappointed.
And I can even go right here and open up this bad boy, and I can pull out the source material for you.
Well, there you go.
Material right there. I got a little.
Well, and it's going to be real interesting when we talk about these on these Patreon shows here, because like you said, you've been a Marvel fan for quite some time. You're the comic book collector. You know about the comics. You know the characters and their backstories. I went in completely cold.
Yeah.
I'm what, about 10 years younger than you or so. So I was kind of just beyond the whole comic book thing. That was never really a thing for me growing up. Comic books were kind of on their way out. I never got into the comic book, so I don't know I know who Captain America is. I know who Iron Man is. But I don't know a lot of the villain characters and their backstories. I don't know the backstories of some of the lesser common characters like Black Panther and Doctor Strange and even Ant-Man. I didn't know the backstories of those characters. So for me, it was really, I like to describe Star Wars as being this whole nother universe that exists with its own set of rules. In a way, the Marvel universe, I was discovering it for the first time as a new universe that seems like it takes place on Earth, but also has its own set of rules, which was kind of interesting. So we'll have a lot of you'll be able to shed some light on a lot of things that maybe I still don't know, even having watched the movies. We'll have a fun back and forth there on those shows.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. So like I said, if you want to get access to that, you got to join the Patreon stuff. At the very lowest, or the very lowest that you can get it at is the $5 level. And we'll be starting that over in July. So that'll be exciting to look at and talk about a little bit. And
that'll give you time to watch the first 5 or 6 movies. So maybe we'll talk about them in phases. I think that'll actually be a good plan.
I think might have to cut them up even more, like half a phase. Like that's a lot to go through. So as always, thank you for joining us here on COASTER-net Update. I'm of course Andrew Barczyk from Chicago, Illinois.
And I'm Danny Miller from Binghamton, New York.
Right on, Ride Warriors.
See you next time, guys.